Hi, shalom friends. One of the most profound definitions of a wise person was given by our sages over 1800 years ago. Ezeu Chacham, who is wise, Halomed Mikol Adam, he who learns from all people. It doesn't say he who goes to a fine university, he who goes and lives in a cultured society, grows up with opera and museums. No. Someone who studies from all people. For that, you truly have to be wise because it necessitates humility as well. You have to be reminded constantly that every person is valuable and every person's life is a lesson in itself. All you have to do is examine it and learn from it. It also empowers all human beings because though it has been said, not everyone can be a teacher. It has also been said, but everyone can teach. So though I might not see myself as teaching anything to anybody, the very fact that I exist and I live in a certain way makes me a form of a teacher. So let's examine this a bit deeper. How is it possible to actually learn from someone who superficially there's nothing to learn from? So let's say you're a successful business person, perhaps you're happily married, maybe you're well established, and etc., and you're walking and you see, God forbid, a homeless addict. You say, what can this person teach me? And we forget something very important. It has been said that everyone makes a mistake. In fact, people are constantly making mistakes. Well, if that's the case, what's the difference between a fool and a wise person? They're both making mistakes. And the answer that is given is the fool repeats the mistake. And the wise person learns from the mistake. I.e., no person is perfect, but from each mistake and each error, he learns how to better himself and what to avoid. Well, if that's the case, you should be able to learn from other people's mistakes as well. So going back to that example of the person on the street who's so unfortunate, he's teaching you perhaps the importance of education, the importance of being sober, the importance of having a support system. And even if you know that, when you see people suffering from the lack thereof, that reinforces the lesson and actually perhaps teaches you to appreciate even more. So we can learn from all people. We can learn from their goodness, and we could also learn from their mistakes what not to do. I'd like to expand this a little bit in terms of society and sort of pose the question to an average young parent. What would you like your child to be? And often there are platitudes, but some of them are quite honest and genuine. I want my child to be successful, happy, well-adjusted, self-esteem, educated, and so on and so forth. They say, well, those are wonderful goals. Do you have a plan? How are you going to get there? How are you going to offer your child all of these wonderful things? And he says, well, I'm going to look around to see other people that are successful. You say, okay, let us examine how people think and how people act. You ask one school of thought, they will tell you that the way to raise well-adjusted children is by being very disciplined with them. You have to clamp down. You have to make sure they listen to rules and regulations. They have to respect you as an authority figure, and so on and so forth. So, wow, that sounds like challenging, but I think I could do that. And then you meet someone who comes from an opposite form. Say, are you crazy? You're going to stifle creativity and sensitivity. Well, the way to do it is just relax. The child will encourage the child to become independent. And actually, yes, there will be at times where the child will act a little bit outlandish, but eventually they'll come to it and you won't be damaging their ego. You say, oh my gosh, now I have two opposites. Then you have another person who tells you, well, you have to send them to school and to follow all of the rules and regulations of the school in order to get to the Ivy League, whatever. And then you'll find someone else says, you're crazy? Why do you want to do that? Kids have natural intelligence and so on and so forth. Let them basically create some type of a charter school where many of the norms are dropped and they experiment with different ways of thinking. So now here you have four, and I'm sure if you think about it, we can find many different ways and methods of raising children. And you ask, which one is the right one? And you look around and you often see the results of such well-meaning ways of life. In other words, though perhaps it was well-meaning, the results don't always equal the hopes and aspirations. So now, if I were to ask you, what can you learn from such a person or from such isms, I would say what not to do. You say, well, sometimes learning what not to do is not as helpful as telling me what to do. So, for example, they say on one great inventor who was trying to find the perfect material for something that he needed, and he was very frustrated because he had done already 90 different materials and none of them actually was the one that he was looking for. When his colleague asked, why do you keep on persisting? You failed 90 times. He says, no, I'm actually much closer to the goal because I know 90 times of what not to try. I know these materials will not work, so I am closer. But wouldn't it be nice, wouldn't it be fine if we could actually be told directly, and yet be told in a manner where though we are given clear and direct guidance, there's still tremendous amount of latitude for you to insert a personality. And you don't have to look that very far, and obviously I'm prejudiced, but the Torah is that document. It tells us what is required. It gives us a guide. For example, I'll just pick one almost randomly. You look at the Ten Commandments, or what is called the Ten Commandments, and it says, honor your father and mother. And there are laws. When are you permitted to disagree with your parents? When you're not permitted to disagree with your parents? How to show honor, how to show respect. Now, obviously, as many children and parents there are on earth, that's how many different ways there will be to honor and respect parents. There's plenty of room. Whether it be a smile or a telephone or an omelet, there's no question about how each person can honor their parents. But there are the basic guidelines. There's no such concept as, the kid, eventually when the kid grows up, they'll appreciate what I did for them. Or, it's not right for me to insist that they honor me. They have to do it on their own. They have to come to love me. Forcing this on them won't add anything. That's not true. The Torah tells us you should teach your children. And you should insist on it because it's not your honor. It's the honor of the Almighty who wants his parents on earth, the parents on earth, to be honored and respected. And the same thing would be about a Shabbos. And the same thing would be about the discipline of eating kosher, and so on and so forth. So I'm not sure I was clear, so let me try to make it even more clear. We have a possibility of becoming wise by examining everyone else's failures and trying to figure out what would work best for us. It is much clearer to find a document and a way of life that tells you and shows you. What's amazing about the Jewish tradition is that our tradition has worked for 3,300 years. And that means in every country, under every environment, and under every political system. So we don't need a new Dr. Spock or another doctor or teacher or philosopher to come up with something unique. The Torah actually gives us methods of education. However, those methods of education and the way to impart the knowledge and the direction of divinity will change according to the character of the person. So what do we need? We have the Torah. What we often need is good teachers and mentors. And my suggestion for all of us listening would be, find yourself a teacher who you could study from, and perhaps adapt mentally or emotionally a couple of families that you see the goodness in those families, and you ask yourself, what was it that they did that made them so successful? Ultimately, it's God's blessing, but everyone has to do their part. So I wish you a lot of luck, and I myself am still in the process. Shalom.